The waitress found him unconscious holding his baby boy. She didn't know he was the mafia boss. 2 a.m., the Crossroads Diner sat at the edge of nowhere, a flickering beacon of fluorescent light fighting against the darkness of rural highway and approaching storm. Inside, the smell of burnt coffee mixed with ozone that promised violence from the sky. Julia Queens counted her tips for the third time, $43.27 for an 8-hour shift. Not enough. Never enough. Not when her brother sat in a cell 300 miles away, convicted of a crime he didn't commit, and the only lawyer she could afford worked from a strip mall and returned calls once a week if she was lucky. Thunder rolled across the horizon, and the first fat drops of rain hit the diner windows like bullets. Julia grabbed her threadbare jacket, said goodnight to Frank the cook, and pushed through the door into the storm. The parking lot was nearly empty, just her rusted Honda and a black Mercedes that definitely didn't belong here. The Mercedes sat with its driver's door hanging open, interior light spilling onto wet pavement. Julia's first instinct was to ignore it. Not her business. Not her problem. She'd learned young that curiosity in situations like this got you killed or worse. But then she heard it. A sound that cut through thunder and rain and every self-preservation instinct she'd honed over 24 years of hard living. A baby crying. Julia ran to the Mercedes, her sneakers splashing through puddles. She found him slumped against her Honda, a man in an expensive suit soaked with rain and blood, his arms wrapped around a bundle that moved and wailed. His head lolled to the side, blood matting dark hair, his face pale as death. But his arms, God, his arms held that baby like it was the only thing in the world that mattered. Mister? Julia touched his shoulder, and his eyes flickered open. Gray, stormy, dangerous even in their glassy confusion. My son, he managed, his accent thick with pain and something European. Please, protect my son. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed completely. Julia stood in the rain, frozen between sense and instinct. The smart thing was to call 911. Let the professionals handle this. Walk away clean. But Julia Queens hadn't called the cops since the night they dragged her brother away in handcuffs, deaf to his protests of innocence. She didn't trust them. Didn't trust anyone. And this man, bleeding, desperate, clutching his child in the middle of a storm, reminded her too much of herself. Alone. Fighting impossible odds. One bad decision away from losing everything. She looked down at the baby, now quiet, staring up at her with dark eyes too old for an infant. She saw the man's gold signet ring, ornate, expensive, engraved with a crest she didn't recognize. She saw the custom suit, the Italian leather shoes, the holster under his jacket. She knew what this was. Knew she should run. Instead, Julia Queens made the choice that would change everything. Okay, she whispered to the unconscious man. I'll help you. God help us both. She got them into her car, the man in the back seat, the baby secured with her spare jacket, and drove into the storm, toward her isolated cabin, toward a future she couldn't possibly imagine. Behind her, 2 black SUVs pulled into the diner parking lot, their occupants scanning the darkness for prey that had already disappeared into the night. The hunt had begun. And Julia didn't even know she was running. Julia's cabin sat at the end of 3 miles of unpaved road, deep in woods that swallowed sound and kept secrets. She'd bought it cash from a foreclosure auction, 2 rooms, no neighbors, no questions asked. Perfect for someone who wanted to disappear. Tonight, she was grateful for every mile of isolation. Getting the unconscious man inside was brutal. He was solid muscle under that expensive suit, easily 6'2" and 200 pounds of deadweight. Julia dragged him through the door, her waitress muscles screaming in protest, and deposited him on her threadbare couch. The baby, she needed to deal with the baby first. Julia had exactly zero experience with infants, but survival instincts translated across species. The child was cold, wet, and probably hungry. She stripped him carefully, checking for injuries and finding none. Just a healthy 6-month-old with his father's dark hair and storm-gray eyes. She wrapped him in her warmest blanket and made a bottle with the formula and supplies she found in the diaper bag the man had been carrying. Expensive stuff. Organic. The kind that cost more than her weekly grocery budget. "Who are you?" she whispered to the sleeping baby as he ate. "And who's your father?" The man groaned from the couch, and Julia's attention snapped back to the more immediate problem. She grabbed her first aid kit, expanded beyond the basics after years of patching up her brother's stupid decisions, and approached cautiously. In the lamplight, she could see him clearly for the first time. Mid-30s, she guessed. Handsome in a dangerous way, all sharp angles and aristocratic features. The blood came from a gash across his temple, deep but not fatal. Someone had hit him hard enough to crack bone. Julia cleaned the wound with steady hands, her years of dealing with diner burns and kitchen accidents making her movements efficient. She found 3 more injuries: bruised ribs, a split lip, and defensive wounds on his knuckles. He'd been fighting before he collapsed. She moved to his jacket, checking for weapons and finding what she expected: a custom pistol, sleek and expensive, with pearl grips and an engraved crest that matched his ring. Moretti, the inscription read. Julia's blood ran cold. She'd heard that name before, whispered in the diner by truckers who moved more than just cargo. The Moretti family controlled everything from the Canadian border to the Gulf: drugs, weapons, protection, politicians. They were the kind of powerful that made local cops look the other way and federal agents retire early. And she'd just brought their boss into her home. "Brilliant, Julia," she muttered, checking his pulse. "Still strong. Still alive. Absolutely brilliant. She should dump him. Drive him back to the highway, leave him for his own people to find. Cut her losses before she ended up dead or worse." But then the baby made a small sound, content, safe, trusting. And Julia looked at the man's battered face, at the way his hand still reached toward where his son had been even in unconsciousness. Whatever he was, monster, criminal, killer, he'd risked everything to protect his child. That had to count for something. Julia finished bandaging his head and sat back, exhausted. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, she'd created a sanctuary for a man who definitely didn't deserve one and a baby who absolutely did. Her phone buzzed. Text from Frank: "Black SUVs asking about strangers." Said nothing. "Be careful." Julia's stomach dropped. They were looking for him already. And Frank, good, loyal Frank, had bought her time she didn't deserve. She looked at the man on her couch, at the gun on her table, at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. She'd spent years avoiding trouble, staying invisible, keeping her head down. But trouble had found her anyway. And now she had to decide: run and let them both die, or stay and fight for something that wasn't even hers to protect. Julia Queens chose to stay. Pablo Moretti drifted in and out of consciousness for 3 days. Concussion, Julia diagnosed from her limited medical knowledge and frantic internet searches. Bad, but not fatal. Probably. She'd moved him to her bed, the couch was too short, too exposed, and taken the floor herself. Between caring for the baby and monitoring Pablo's vitals, she barely slept. Just snatched moments of rest between feedings and fever checks and the constant, gnawing fear that his people would find them before he woke up enough to explain. The baby, at least, was easy. He ate, he slept, he watched her with those ancient eyes. She'd named him Leo in her mind, not knowing his real name felt wrong, like he deserved better than the baby. On the second day, she found Pablo's phone. Dead battery, expensive model, locked with biometrics. She charged it but didn't turn it on. Whatever was on that phone would lead his enemies straight to them. She also found his wallet. Credit cards in 3 different names. A driver's license that listed him as Peter Martinelli. Cash, at least $5,000 in hundreds. And a photograph, worn at the edges from handling, Pablo, younger and smiling, with a beautiful dark-haired woman holding a newborn baby. The woman's eyes held the same ancient quality as Leo's. And she was clearly dying. You could see it in the translucent quality of her skin, the shadows under her eyes, the way she held her baby like she was already saying goodbye. Julia stared at that photograph for a long time, understanding dawning cold and heavy in her chest. Her name was Isabella. Julia spun around, nearly dropping the wallet. Pablo was awake, propped up on pillows, his gray eyes clear but haunted. "I'm sorry," Julia stammered. "I wasn't snooping, I was just looking for answers." "I understand." Pablo's gaze drifted to where Leo slept in a makeshift bassinet, Julia's laundry basket lined with blankets. "You've been caring for him." "For us." "Thank you." Julia set the wallet down carefully. "Who are you running from?" "My second in command. Marco." Pablo's jaw tightened. He thought I'd gone soft after Isabella died. Thought a man who'd take a 6-month leave to care for his infant son was weak. So he decided to take what he thought I no longer deserved. Your empire. My family's legacy. My wife's memory. My son's future. Pablo's hands clenched into fists. Marco waited until I took Leo to the pediatrician, something normal, something safe. He had men waiting in the parking lot. They shot my driver, my bodyguard. Would have killed us both if I hadn't. He stopped, his breath coming fast and shallow. Julia grabbed water from her nightstand and helped him drink. "You don't have to explain," she said quietly. "Yes, I do. You saved us. You deserve to know what you're protecting." Pablo set down the water. "I killed 3 of them with my bare hands. Took one of their guns and shot 2 more. Got Leo to my car and drove until I couldn't see straight. The storm, the blood loss, the concussion, I don't remember much after that. Just knowing I had to keep Leo safe. And you ended up at my diner. Fate or luck or God's last mercy." Pablo's smile was bitter. "Take your pick." Julia was quiet, processing. "Then, why bring the baby with you? Why not leave him somewhere safe?" Pablo's expression transformed, rage and love and grief crashing together. "Because Marco knows Leo is my weakness. He'll use him to draw me out, to control me. The only way to keep my son safe is to keep him close until I can eliminate the threat completely. That's insane. That's my world." Pablo studied her. "Now tell me, Julia Queens, yes, I found your license. Why does a woman who clearly wants nothing to do with violence risk everything to save strangers in the rain?" Julia could have lied. Should have lied. But something about this moment made truth feel inevitable. "My brother," she said. "He's serving 15 years for armed robbery he didn't commit. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong public defender. I've been trying to save enough for a real lawyer, but..." She gestured around the shabby cabin. "Waitress wages don't go far." Pablo was quiet for a long moment. "Then, when this is over, when I take back what's mine, I will give you the best legal team money can buy. I will free your brother. That's my promise." Julia's throat tightened. "Why would you do that?" Because you gave me sanctuary when you had every reason not to. Because you're fighting for family against impossible odds. Because, Pablo reached out slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because you're more than just a waitress. You're the woman who saved the Moretier. That makes you sacred. His touch was gentle despite the calluses. And Julia, who hadn't let anyone close in years, found herself leaning into it. We should rest, she managed. You need to heal before. Gunfire shattered the window. Pablo moved on pure instinct, rolling from the bed and covering Leo with his body while Julia hit the floor. Glass rained down, and outside, engines roared. They found us, Pablo said, his voice cold and lethal. Where's my gun? Julia pointed to the dresser. How many? Too many. Pablo checked the clip. But they want me alive long enough to tell them where I've hidden my offshore accounts. That buys us time. Enough for what? For you to take Leo and run while I hold them off. No. Julia grabbed his arm. There's a root cellar. Hidden door under the rug in the kitchen. You and Leo hide there. I'll deal with them. Julia. They don't know you're here. Let me talk to them. I'm good at being nobody. Julia met his eyes. Trust me. Outside, car doors slammed. Men's voices called out in Italian. Pablo hesitated, then nodded. Julia helped him into the cellar, barely big enough for Pablo and Leo, dark and musty but safe. Stay quiet no matter what, Julia whispered. Then she closed the door and went to face the monsters. The men at her door looked like executives cosplaying as gangsters, expensive suits and the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. 4 of them, led by a man with silver temples and a smile that made Julia's skin crawl. Good evening, Silver Temples said. We're looking for a man. Tall, dark hair, possibly injured. Have you seen anyone matching that description? Julia wrapped her bathrobe tighter, playing scared. I just got home from work. I haven't seen anyone. May we come in? Just to look around? Do you have a warrant? We're not police, Signora. We're family. And family doesn't need warrants. He pushed past her. The others fanned out, searching her cabin with efficient brutality. They opened closets, checked under furniture, even looked in her refrigerator. One paused at the blood on her couch. What's this? I cut myself cooking, Julia said quickly. Last week. They searched for 10 minutes that felt like 10 hours. Julia stood in her kitchen, directly over the cellar door, praying Pablo would stay quiet, that Leo wouldn't cry. Finally, Silver Temples returned. You're sure you haven't seen anyone? I'm sure. What about at the diner? 3 nights ago. Black Mercedes, man with a baby? Julia's heart stopped, but she kept her expression confused. Lots of cars at the diner. I don't pay attention. Silver Temples studied her face, looking for tells. Julia had spent years hiding emotions. She was very good at being invisible. If you do see something, he pulled out a business card, call this number. There's a substantial reward. $50,000. Julia's eyes widened genuinely. 50,000 would solve every problem she had. For a moment, she considered it. Then she thought of the photograph in Pablo's wallet. Of Isabella, dying but smiling, holding her baby. Of the way Pablo had fought to keep Leo safe. I'll call if I see anything, Julia lied smoothly. They left. Julia waited until their taillights disappeared before she collapsed against the counter, shaking. She opened the cellar door. Pablo emerged, Leo clutched against his chest, his gun still drawn. "You're okay?" he asked. "Fine. They're gone. They believed me." Julia's voice shook. "They offered me $50,000. And you said nothing." Pablo stepped closer, his free hand cupping her face. "You chose us over money you desperately need." "Why?" Julia looked down at Leo, who had grabbed her finger with his tiny hand. "Because he deserves better than being hunted like an animal. He deserves to grow up safe and loved." "You care about him." "I've been caring for him for 3 days. Feeding him, changing him, singing him to sleep. Of course I care about him." Julia pulled away, embarrassed. "But that doesn't mean I'm equipped for this. You've been exactly what Leo needs. More than anyone since Isabella died." Pablo's expression was haunted. "The nannies I hired were professionals, but they didn't love him. They didn't sing. They didn't look at him the way you do." "He matters," Julia said simply. "That's why I'm going to end this. Marco, the men hunting us, the entire power structure. I'm going to burn it all down." Pablo shifted Leo to one arm and took Julia's hand. "Help me. Help me take back my family, and I'll give you everything. Your brother, your freedom, your safety. But more than that, stay with us. Be the mother he lost. Be mine." Julia should have said no. But when she looked at Leo, she saw something she'd been missing for years. Family. Purpose. Love. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll help you. For Leo." Pablo smiled, genuine and hopeful. "Then let's go to war. And when we win, I'll give you a throne and a prince who already loves you." Pablo spent the 4th day teaching Julia how to shoot. "You need to protect yourself," he insisted. "And more importantly, protect Leo when I can't." They practiced in the woods behind her cabin. Pablo moved with professional efficiency despite his injuries, demonstrating grip, stance, breathing. Julia was terrible at first, flinching at the noise, closing her eyes. But she learned. Because Leo was back in the cabin, trusting them to keep him safe. "Better," Pablo said after her 10th attempt hit the target. "Your instinct is to close your eyes, but you're compensating. This is insane." Julia lowered the gun. "I'm a waitress learning to shoot from a mafia boss. My life has officially jumped the shark." Pablo laughed genuinely. "Welcome to my world. Where everything is insane and the only people you can trust are the ones crazy enough to save you from thunderstorms." Their eyes met and something passed between them. Recognition. Attraction. Dangerous chemistry. "We should get back," Julia said. "Leo will be hungry." They returned to find Leo awake, studying his hands. Julia scooped him up automatically, and he made a sound of contentment that shattered something in her chest. "He knows you," Pablo said softly. "He trusts you already. He's smart. He knows I'm the one with the formula. It's more than that." Pablo moved closer. "You love him. And he feels it." Julia wanted to deny it. But lies had never been her strength. "Yeah," she admitted. "I love him." Pablo reached out, his hand covering hers on Leo's back. "Isabella would have liked you. She always said Leo needed someone strong. I think she would have chosen you. I'm not trying to replace her. I know. But you're giving Leo something Isabella wanted: normalcy, peace, a mother's love without the shadow of my world." Pablo's thumb traced circles on her hand. "You're giving us both hope. Before Julia could respond, her phone buzzed. Text from Frank, black SUV's back. One had your photo. Be careful. Julia's blood ran cold. They have my picture. They know we're connected. Pablo's expression hardened. Then Marcos found our trail. It's only a matter of time. So what do we do? We can't run forever. Not with Leo. We need to go on offense. Pablo pulled out his phone. I need to make a call. To someone I trust. Someone who can get us to the city. You said you couldn't trust anyone. Not in my organization. But my wife had family. Cousins who never approved of her marrying me. They'll help us for Isabella's sake. Julia wanted to argue. But she knew he was right. You couldn't hide from the mob forever. Make the call, she said. But Pablo? If anything happens to Leo, I'll burn the world down myself, Pablo finished. He's my son. My blood. My legacy. I'll die before I let Marco touch him. Julia nodded, holding Leo closer. Then let's make sure nobody has to die except the ones who deserve it. Pablo's smile was sharp and dangerous. Now you're thinking like a Moretti. I knew there was a queen hiding under that waitress uniform. He powered on the phone, and Julia watched him transform, cold, commanding, absolute. This was Pablo Moretti in his element. And instead of terrifying her, it made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. The call to Isabella's cousin, a woman named Sophia who ran a legitimate restaurant chain, took 3 minutes. Sophia agreed immediately, her voice tight with grief and fury. Isabella's son, she'd said. Family. We'll keep you safe. She was sending a car in 2 hours. Clean, untraceable, with a driver who'd take them to a safe house in the city where Pablo could rebuild his network. 2 hours to pack. 2 hours before Julia left her sanctuary forever. She moved through the cabin mechanically, gathering clothes, formula, supplies. Pablo watched from the couch, his color better, his strength returning. You're having second thoughts, Pablo said quietly. Julia paused. I'm having 100 thoughts. This is crazy. I don't belong in your world. My world is broken. It needs someone like you to fix it. Pablo stood, moving to her. Julia, look at me. She did. His gray eyes were intense, genuine. Marco betrayed me because I showed weakness, Pablo said. Because I took time to grieve my wife and care for my son. In my world, that's unforgivable. But you know what I learned watching you care for Leo? What? That weakness isn't love or grief or being human. Real weakness is being so afraid of appearing soft that you sacrifice everything that matters. Pablo cupped her face. You make me stronger. You and Leo. And I refuse to be ashamed of that. What are you saying? I'm saying when I take back my empire, I'm not going back to the man I was. I'm going to be better. For Leo. For you. For the future Isabella wanted. His forehead touched hers. Stay with me. Not because you're afraid or because I promised to help your brother, but because you want to. Because you feel what I feel. Because you're already half in love with both of us. Julia wanted to argue. But his words struck too close to truth. I am terrified, she whispered. Of your world, of this feeling, of losing you both if I let myself care too much. Fear is smart. Fear keeps you alive. Pablo's lips brushed her forehead. But love, messy, complicated, dangerous love, is what makes survival worth it. Isabella taught me that. You're teaching me again. Before Julia could respond, headlights swept across her windows. Wrong direction. Wrong timing. Pablo grabbed his gun. Get to the cellar. Now. How many? 3 vehicles. Maybe 12 men. Pablo's voice was ice. This isn't reconnaissance. This is a death squad. Julia grabbed Leo and the diaper bag. The cellar won't work twice. Then we run. Pablo grabbed spare bullets. Out the back, through the woods. Creek half a mile east. If we can get there. Gunfire shattered her front door. Pablo returned fire, driving attackers back. Go! Now! Julia ran, Leo clutched to her chest, adrenaline making her fly. She hit the back door as men poured through the front. Pablo laid down covering fire, dropping 2 men. But there were too many. Julia crashed into the woods, branches tearing at her clothes, Leo crying, gunfire echoing behind them. Then Pablo was beside her, blood streaming from a fresh shoulder wound, his face pale but determined. Keep moving, he gasped. The creek. We can lose them in the water. They ran through darkness, stumbling, sliding. Leo screamed, terrified, and Julia tried to soothe him while running for their lives. The creek appeared, black water running fast over rocks. Pablo plunged in waist-deep, pulling Julia after him. Downstream, he ordered. Half a mile. There's a road. Sophia's people will find us. They waded through freezing water, Leo's cries softening as shock set in. Behind them, flashlights swept the trees. Men called out in Italian. Julia's legs went numb, her body shaking. But she kept moving, kept protecting the baby, kept following Pablo. After what felt like hours, they climbed onto a muddy bank. Pablo collapsed, his shoulder bleeding badly, breathing labored. Can't go further, he managed. Take Leo. When Sophia's car comes, get in. Don't wait. I'm not leaving you. Julia. No. She set Leo down and turned to Pablo, pressing her hands against his wound. I didn't save your life just to watch you bleed out. We survived together or not at all. Pablo stared at her with wonder. You're insane. I learned from the best. Julia ripped her shirt, binding his shoulder. Now shut up and let me save you again. His laugh turned to a cough, but his hand found hers, holding tight. Yes, ma'am. Headlights appeared on the road, a black sedan. Sophia's people. They'd survived. Together. Sophia's safe house was a penthouse with bulletproof windows and enough security to make Fort Knox jealous. Julia stood in the bathroom watching blood and creek water swirl down the drain, wondering how her life had become this. In the next room, a doctor worked on Pablo's shoulder. Leo slept in a designer crib that had appeared within an hour, unbothered by the chaos. Julia emerged to find Pablo shirtless, freshly bandaged, arguing with Sophia in Italian. Sophia was 50-ish, elegant, with Isabella's eyes and none of her warmth. English, Pablo said when he saw Julia. It's rude to exclude our guest. Your guest. Sophia's laugh was sharp. This girl is a waitress you've known less than a week. She saved my son's life. My life. She's earned the right to hear what we're planning. Pablo's voice carried absolute authority. Tell us what you've learned about Marco. Sophia sighed, pulling out a tablet with surveillance photos. Marco's consolidated power faster than expected. Your captains either joined him or disappeared. He's claiming you're dead. And the families? Waiting to see if you're really dead or if this is some power play. You have maybe 48 hours before they officially recognize Marco. After that. Sophia's expression was grim. You're just a ghost with a grudge. Julia listened, her mind racing. What about proof of life? Can't you just call them? Words mean nothing in our world, Sophia explained. Marco will claim Pablo's injured, compromised, weak. No, Pablo needs to appear in person. In front of the council. Prove he's still the man they feared. The council meets tomorrow night, Pablo said. Marco's calling a vote to transfer power. Then we go tomorrow. Julia crossed her arms. We show them Pablo's alive, we take back what's his. It's not that simple, Sophia protested. Marco will have the building surrounded. Walking in is suicide. Not if they don't see us coming. Pablo's eyes met Julia's. Marco knows everyone in my organization. But he doesn't know Julia. To him, she's invisible. Understanding dawned. You want to use her as a Trojan horse. I want her to walk through the front door carrying something Marco won't expect. Pablo's smile was sharp. Me. The plan came together over 12 hours. Sophia would get Julia an invitation disguised as catering staff. Waitresses were always hired, always overlooked, always invisible. Julia would smuggle in Pablo's gun, his phone, and a recording device. Then, when the moment was right, Pablo would make his entrance. It's insane, the doctor said. It's perfect, Pablo corrected. Marco thinks he's won. He'll be relaxed, confident. He won't see the strike coming. Julia spent the day preparing, learning the building layout, memorizing faces. Sophia coached her on being invisible. You've done this before, Sophia observed. Been invisible. Why? Julia was quiet. Because when you're poor and powerless, invisibility is survival. But Pablo sees you. Yeah. Julia's smile was sad. He does. I'm not sure if that's wonderful or terrifying. Both, Sophia said simply. Love in our world always is. That evening, Julia dressed in simple black, the universal costume of service workers. She braided her hair, kept makeup minimal, practiced the blank expression she'd perfected. Pablo watched from the couch, Leo sleeping against his chest. When Julia turned to face him, she saw pride, desire, fear, love. You don't have to do this, he said. No, you can't find another way. Julia crossed to him, kissing Leo's head, then Pablo's lips. Brief, sweet, promising. This is what partners do. Partners, Pablo repeated, voice rough. I like that. Good. Because when this is over, you're making good on those promises. The lawyer. The safety. And, she hesitated. A future for us. I'll give you everything. Pablo caught her hand, pressing it to his heart. My empire, my name, my life. All of it. Julia wanted to stay. But safety was an illusion as long as Marco lived. I'll see you soon, she said. Both of you. Then she walked out toward the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. Behind her, Pablo held his son and whispered a prayer. Keep her safe, Isabella. Bring her back. And I swear I'll be the man you wanted. Leo stirred, and Pablo thought maybe his late wife was listening. The cabin was silent in the aftermath of violence. Bodies lay in the yard, testament to the assassins who'd found them and the brutal defense Pablo had mounted. Julia sat on the porch steps, her hands still shaking, watching dawn break over the mountains like the world hadn't just tried to kill them. The baby, she still didn't know his name, slept peacefully in the makeshift crib she'd fashioned from a dresser drawer. Innocent. Untouched by the carnage his father had wrought to protect him. Pablo emerged from the cabin, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. He'd showered, changed into clothes she'd found in her brother's old room, and looked almost human. Almost. The hardness in his eyes remained, the violence still coiled beneath his surface like a sleeping predator. His name is Alessandro, Pablo said, sitting beside her. After my father. We call him Sandro. It was the first personal thing Pablo had shared, and Julia accepted it like a gift. He's beautiful. He looks like his mother. Pablo's voice cracked slightly, and Julia saw the grief he kept locked away. Maria. She died 6 months ago. Complications from childbirth that the doctors said shouldn't have happened but did anyway. I'm sorry. She made me promise something before she died. Pablo stared at his coffee, his jaw working. She'd grown up in the system, foster homes, group facilities, aging out at 18 with nothing. She begged me to never let Sandro become part of that world. To keep him close, always. Even if it meant taking him into danger. Julia understood then. That's why you had him with you when they came. I was supposed to meet with my second-in-command, Dante, to discuss territory expansion. A routine meeting. Sandro was with me because I don't trust anyone else with him. Not nannies, not bodyguards, not family. Pablo's hands clenched around his cup. Dante drugged my coffee. When I woke up, we were in my car, heading toward the river. He was going to stage it as an accident, the grieving boss who lost control of his vehicle, killing himself and his heir. But you fought back. I crashed the car deliberately. Better to risk the accident than guarantee the execution. I grabbed Sandro and ran. Made it maybe 3 miles before I collapsed. His dark eyes found hers. You saved us, Julia. You saved my son when you could have called the police, when you could have turned away. Why? Julia thought about her answer carefully. Because I've seen what happens when good people turn away from someone who needs help. My brother was arrested for a crime he didn't commit. Witnesses who could have spoken up didn't. People who knew the truth stayed silent because they didn't want to get involved. She met Pablo's gaze. I'm not that person. I won't be that person. Even for a criminal. Even for a father protecting his son. Pablo set down his coffee and took her hand. His palm was rough, scarred, deadly. But his grip was gentle. I need to go back to the city. Dante thinks I'm dead, which gives me an advantage. But I can't take Sandro into what's coming. You want me to keep him. I want you to keep him safe. For 2 days. Maybe 3. Until I've dealt with Dante and secured my position. His thumb traced patterns on her wrist. I know it's asking too much. I'll do it, Julia said immediately. But I'm coming with you to the city. You'll need someone Dante doesn't know, someone who can get close without raising alarms. Pablo studied her face, searching for doubt, finding only determination. You understand what you're offering? If this goes wrong, Dante will kill you just for helping me. Then don't let it go wrong. A ghost of a smile crossed Pablo's face. You're either very brave or very stupid, Julia Queens. Maybe both. She squeezed his hand. But that baby in there deserves to grow up knowing his father. And you deserve the chance to keep your promise to your wife. Pablo's expression cracked, vulnerability breaking through his armor. Maria would have liked you. She had the same fire. The same refusal to back down from impossible odds. Then let's make sure Sandro grows up hearing stories about both of you." They sat in silence as the sun rose higher, two people from different worlds united by a crying baby and a promise made to a dying woman. Julia didn't know if they'd survive what was coming. But she knew she wouldn't walk away. Not from Sandro. Not from Pablo. Not from the first thing that had felt right in years. Julia's ancient pickup truck rattled into the city at dusk. Pablo slouched low in the passenger seat, a baseball cap pulled over his distinctive features. In the back seat, covered by a blanket, lay enough weapons to start a small war. "Turn left here," Pablo directed, his voice tight. "Dante will have the main entrances watched, but there's a service entrance through the kitchen that connects to my private office. Your headquarters has a kitchen entrance." Julia maneuvered through traffic, her heart hammering. "It used to be a restaurant. My father bought it 30 years ago, converted the dining room into a command center. But he kept the kitchen operational for meetings, easier to talk business over food." They parked 3 blocks away, in an alley that smelled of garbage and broken dreams. Pablo armed himself with practiced efficiency, 2 pistols, a knife, and the cold determination of a man who'd already died once. "You stay in the truck," Pablo said. "Absolutely not." Julia grabbed one of the smaller pistols. "You need backup. Someone Dante won't recognize. You don't know how to use that. Point and shoot. How complicated can it be?" She checked the safety like she'd seen him do. "Besides, you need me. I'm your ace card. The one person Dante hasn't accounted for." Pablo looked like he wanted to argue, but time was running out. "Stay behind me. If shooting starts, you run. Clear?" "Crystal." They moved through darkening streets, 2 shadows among thousands, until they reached the service entrance. Pablo used a key from a chain around his neck, and they slipped inside. The kitchen was empty but running. Steam rose from industrial pots, meat sizzled on grills, preparations for the dinner crowd that would never know the real business being conducted upstairs. "This way," Pablo whispered, leading her through a maze of corridors. They nearly made it. "Well, well." The voice came from behind them, smooth and venomous. "The ghost returns." Pablo spun, pushing Julia behind him. Dante emerged from a doorway, flanked by 2 armed men. He was handsome in a predatory way, his expensive suit impeccable, his smile sharp enough to cut. "Hello, old friend," Pablo said calmly. "You're supposed to be dead. I watched that car sink into the river." "You watched a car sink? You assumed I was inside." "Sloppy, Dante. My father would be disappointed." Dante's smile faltered. "Your father was weak. Sentimental. He let emotion cloud judgment. I'm fixing his mistakes. By trying to murder his grandson. By eliminating dead weight. That baby is a liability, Pablo. A weakness. And in our world, weakness gets you killed." "Funny," Pablo said. "I was thinking the same thing about traitors." Dante raised his weapon, but Julia was faster. She fired, not at Dante, but at the light fixture above his head. Glass exploded, plunging the corridor into darkness. Pablo moved like a force of nature. Julia heard gunshots, grunts, the meaty sound of fists meeting flesh. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart trying to escape her chest. When the emergency lights flickered on, Dante was on his knees, Pablo's gun pressed to his head. The 2 flanking soldiers lay unconscious. "You made one critical mistake," Pablo said quietly. "You thought I needed you. That I'd be lost without my second-in-command. But I've been building this empire since I was 16. I know every soldier, every operation, every secret that keeps this organization running. You? You were convenient. Replaceable. Kill me then, Dante spat. Prove you're still the ruthless bastard your father raised. No. Pablo lowered his gun. I'm going to let you live. So you can watch me rebuild everything you tried to destroy. So you can see my son grow up and inherit an empire you'll never touch. Guards. Men appeared from doorways Julia hadn't noticed, Pablo's loyal soldiers who'd been waiting for his signal. They grabbed Dante, dragging him away as he screamed threats and promises. Pablo turned to Julia, his expression softening. That was insane. Shooting out the lights? It worked, didn't it? It saved my life. He pulled her close, and for a moment, they just stood there in the emergency-lit corridor, two people who'd survived impossible odds. Thank you. Thank me when we get Sandro back and your brothers out of prison. Pablo's smile was genuine, warm. Deal. 3 weeks after the coup, Julia stood in a courthouse watching her brother walk out of prison, vindicated. Pablo had used his considerable influence, and probably some threats, to push through an expedited review of Ryan's case. New evidence had mysteriously appeared, witnesses had suddenly remembered crucial details, and the prosecutor who'd railroaded him had resigned in disgrace. Ryan Queens was a free man. I don't understand, Ryan said as Julia threw her arms around him. How did this happen? The lawyer said the appeals process would take years. I got help, Julia said simply. From a friend. Pablo waited by a black sedan, his suit immaculate, his presence commanding even in the courthouse parking lot. Sandro dozed in a carrier strapped to his chest, peaceful and oblivious to the power his father wielded. Ryan's eyes widened when he saw Pablo. Is that, Julia, is that Pablo Moretti? The Pablo Moretti? The one who cleared your name, Julia confirmed. And the one I've been staying with. Staying with? Ryan's voice rose. Julia, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? Saving a baby. And maybe finding something I didn't know I needed. Pablo approached, extending his hand to Ryan. Mr. Queens. I'm glad we could correct the injustice done to you. Ryan shook his hand warily. My sister helped you, didn't she? That's why you did this. Your sister saved my son's life. And mine. This is a small repayment for an unpayable debt. There's no such thing as a small favor with men like you. Ryan looked at Julia. Tell me you understand what you've gotten into. Tell me you're not being coerced. I'm not being coerced, Julia said firmly. Ryan, I made my choice. I'm exactly where I want to be. Ryan studied her face, and whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. Okay. But if he hurts you, then you'll do what? Challenge a mafia boss? Julia smiled. I appreciate the brotherly protection, but I can handle myself. Pablo's driver took Ryan to a hotel Pablo had arranged, a suite, paid for a month, with a job interview scheduled at a legitimate construction company Pablo owned. It wasn't charity, it was investment in the family of the woman who'd saved his world. Later that night, Julia stood in Pablo's penthouse overlooking the city, Sandro asleep in her arms. The baby had bonded to her completely, reaching for her whenever she entered a room, calming at her voice. I talked to my lawyers today, Pablo said, joining her at the window. About adoption proceedings. If something happens to me, I want it in writing that Sandro goes to you. Not my family. Not the system. You. Julia's throat tightened. Pablo. You're the only person I trust with him, Julia. the only one who sees him as a child instead of a pawn or an heir or a liability. Pablo's hand covered hers on Sandro's back. Stay. Not as his nanny or his protector. As his mother. As my partner. Your partner in what? Running a crime empire? My partner in everything. I'm not asking you to become a criminal. I'm asking you to help me build something different. The Morettas have been about violence and control for 3 generations. Maybe it's time we were about something else. Protection. Community. Power used for something besides expansion. Julia looked down at Sandro, at his peaceful face, and thought about the waitress she'd been 3 weeks ago. Exhausted. Desperate. Invisible. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who'd stared down assassins and survived a siege. I have conditions, Julia said. Name them. Sandro grows up normal. School, friends, birthday parties. I don't care if he's the heir to a crime empire, he gets to be a kid first. Agreed. Ryan stays clean. No pressure to join the organization, no dragging him into your world. Already arranged. He'll have legitimate work for as long as he wants it. And I'm not just a figurehead. If I'm your partner, I get a real voice. In decisions, in strategy, in everything. Pablo turned her to face him, Sandro nestled between them. Julia Queens, you've had a voice since the moment you chose to save us instead of call the police. Everything I have, everything I am, I owe to you. You're not a figurehead. You're the queen of this empire, whether you want the title or not. That's a terrifying amount of responsibility. It's a terrifying amount of power. The question is, can you handle it? Julia thought about her father, who'd taught her to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. About her brother, who'd survived 3 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. About the baby in her arms, who deserved to grow up knowing love and safety. Yes, Julia said. I can handle it. Pablo kissed her then, gentle and fierce all at once, with Sandro dozed between them like a blessing. The waitress from the truck stop was gone. In her place stood Julia Queens, partner to a mafia boss, mother to his heir, and the woman who'd changed the trajectory of an empire with one decision in a thunderstorm. She'd saved a baby. She'd saved a man. And in the process, she'd saved herself. From now on, the Moretti family would remember the night everything changed. The night a waitress with nothing to lose became the most important person in their world. And anyone who forgot that lesson would learn it the hard way. The end.
Hope you enjoyed the story. Stay tuned for more interesting and captivating tales. Please like, subscribe and share.